Oh,
And he'll go into people's houses at night and just wreck up the place.
the greatest line in any show ever, by far.
Richard Nixon always had a certain underlying darkness underneath him. He self-admitted, he looked
Don't
into
ever ask a Cambodian what they think about Richard Nixon.
There was that line where Richard Nixon claimed he looked into a mirror and he didn't see a human being anymore.
Oh, he didn't see anything. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, because I like the idea that they resurrect Nixon in 3000 or whatever as a head, and he's so broken and kind of like mad pathologically. It's kind of like his chance of revenge. Like he was always scared of them eating him alive, and they did. Watergate onward, he was the most disgraced president of the 20th century almost.
Though his autobiography or his memoirs sold really well.
I mean, yeah.
Who wouldn't want to read? It's like the OJ book or something.
Oh. But the thing, and then it just seems so apt and at least hilarious that Nixon's intent once he becomes the most unlikely thing, he becomes president again on a third term.
Yeah, nobody can be elected president more than twice.
But he has a new body, so by some technicality, he can run again.
Oh, they don't even question it because it's a shiny new body.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. It probably is illegal, but they just go,
Why not?
Yeah, it's been a long time.
And he stays at the Watergate.
The thing is, and all he wants to do, like his ultimate dream is just like yes, and he can just go into people's houses at night and wreck up the place.
He's General Chaos, I suppose. He's Futurama's Nixon. It's like a scolded post-tape release, post-Watergate Nixon. But like obviously Nixon's whole political career was just like surrounded by paranoia, like all the way back from like the communist trials that made him to like even his in the debates with Kennedy for the 1960 election, they quoted a Ike Eisenhower line about him being like sort of incompetent, and then Nixon was like, oh, that was a facetious remark. Oh man, it's just like his whole life is just surrounded by paranoia, and I love how Futurama and The Simpsons do as well, because he ends up being in hell.
Yeah.
They just like poke fun of that to the degree that they almost made him like a staple of popular culture. I guess he was prior, but for the next generation.
Yeah, no.
Beyond the 1970s.
It's hard to imagine Nixon sticking around in the same way without The Simpsons and especially Futurama.
He was a zeitgeist of like kids of the 70s. Like there's been like sort of cancelled, comedians and songwriters who've referenced, like they were kids and they've referenced their earliest memories like Nixon and things like that, the president flying away in a helicopter.
Yeah.
It's like no wonder they were such a fucked up generation. Mm-hmm. It's amazing, really.
Yeah, and the ones who saw them just get shot in the head, heard about theirs getting shot in the head.
Yeah, nuts,
10
right?
years earlier.
Yeah, crazy.
But and the fascinating thing as well, it's like I wonder about this is my amateur kind of armchair psychologist, historian, Nixon thing, psychohistory. Well, what I think is fascinating is that, Nixon there were enough people, critics in the media, from fairly sane individuals like Paul Newman to more inane but hilarious and lucid Hunter S. Thompson types who were accusing Nixon of being just this evil, nasty, corrupt man. And Nixon presented himself as a gentle, kind of humble man of the people.
He was a Quaker, or raised a Quaker, and I think he had a genuine, he genuinely wanted to change the world for the better, but I think he's like Hamlet, his fallibility just got in the way of every decision he made, and he went for the easier option, the path of least resistance, and became corrupted by the system he hated because of it.
We know we have an idea of how Nixon presented himself, and we have a vague idea of how when I say how he saw himself, I mean how he actually saw himself, not how he saw himself in a memoir, which is hard to say.
Yeah.
Because we're not telepaths, and he's passed on. But I wonder, like, you can judge a man someone by their actions, and obviously his actions show that he was a corrupt, paranoid, and really quite ruthless character. Ultimately, kind of a warrior, kind of an a warrior politician. You know, he was ready to, you know, step on them while they were down. And they were all like this. Lyndon B. Johnson was like this. Kennedy had his dead father's money. You know, apparently Jimmy Carter was like this, according to Hunter S. Thompson.
Yeah,
it's hard to imagine, but apparently, look it up on YouTube. It's very hilarious, actually.
Yeah, he's on Canadian television.
Yeah, he's the meanest man Hunter S. Thompson ever met, along with Sonny Barter of the Hells Angels, which says something.
Oh, of course, yeah.
But
and George Wallace, but I don't think Hunter S. Thompson ever met him.
Right,
but
right.
he wouldn't have liked him.
No, God no.
Many an article where he just like has all caps, like swearing at him, and that's all he writes about Wallace.
Yeah, man. But yeah, and so we have this like, it's like Nixon's so determined, possibly by the 70s, that he doesn't become, or at least that his voters don't realize that he has become the person that his critics accuse him of being. Nixon reads Hunter S. Thompson and probably deep down thinks, oh, he doesn't know how right he is. But he wants to keep it. Nixon doesn't want to admit it to himself. Nixon's ashamed of himself too about it, possibly. Because he knows his parents wouldn't approve, probably, up in heaven or wherever they are. And then in the year 3000, Nixon's like, yeah, I am that evil man. To hell with it.
He embraces it.
Yeah. I will go into people's houses at night and wake up the place.
That's the genius of that Futurama episode. And this is the episode where they, just quickly before I say this,
please.
Hunter S. Thompson actually met Nixon once. I think it was on an airplane or a bus. And he didn't actually mention anything political. They just talked about football. Because they both liked football. I've always found that a really funny tidbit. But anyway, this is the episode that establishes Nixon as like a mainstay character in Futurama. Obviously, we talked about, I didn't remember, he's in the pilot episode.
Yes.
We're in the Hall of Presidents. But yeah, he's upgraded from the Hall of Presidents to being like a side character. You know, by the time of the movies, he's the president of Earth still, and he's like in Bender's Big Score, he has a fairly prominent role, you know, in like a Futurama movie.
Yeah.
It's interesting how they just kept him for the whole run. I mean, he's probably in 6 and 7 as well.
Yeah, he got re-elected in season 6. Remember there's that great time travel episode?
Yeah, that's one of the really good ones in those 2 seasons.
Definitely, yeah.
I do forget about that.
Decision 3012, I think.
Yeah, Nixon versus Obama's analog. Which is, anyway, it's weird when Futurama got into, like, the 2010s with the cultural references.
Well, Obama worked at Panucci's Pizza at one time, according to the newer Futurama.
Yeah. What a weird reference. Yeah, it does your head in a little bit when you think about it, just because... Yeah, I don't know. It's a show you watch when you're a kid, and you see these, like, antiquated... references, right? Like Nixon, for example. And then by the time they're doing like contemporary stuff, it just feels like Futurama imitating other shows of like, you know, other animated sitcoms that do contemporary references.
You know, one political reference of contemporary American politics or political cultural reference that Futurama makes a lot is to Mr. Al Gore. And that wasn't...
That's true.
But you know what's interesting is in the 2000s, that Al Gore was still prominent when I was watching Futurama because of the Inconvenient Truth.
Yeah.
So Al Gore still was like a prominent figure when I was watching it. And obviously when Al Gore was just vice president and was almost the president, when Futurama was airing, those references would have made a lot more sense. You know, have you met my friend Al... I believe you know my friend Al Gore. Remember he's on one of the dollar bill... $500 bill or something.
But Al Gore's also a staple of animated American sitcom, you know, making fun of incidences. Every show's made fun of Al Gore, even at that time.
Also,
because he's such a joke, like in his presentation.
Yeah, I mean,
Al Gore as a politician seems, I don't know, I'm fairly ignorant. I don't know that too much about Al Gore. But he would have, I'm sure, been a better president than George W. Bush.
I goes without saying. I mean, I will say Al Gore always seemed like a nice man to me, and I always thought, like, you know, the Inconvenient Truth courses were very good. Although it was always a bit, I don't know to what degree this is true, or if this is just tabloid crap. Like the amount of you burning up a lot of greenhouse gases of those jets and stuff. It concerns me about all those people.
Of course, yeah, the sort of hypocrisy. But anyway, I love how that was such a close election. But some people have said that it was won because in one of the debates, like, Al Gore was, like, arcing up to George W. Bush while he was speaking, like, getting right in his face, because George W. Bush said something kind of, you know, harsh against him. And George W. Bush didn't even notice him, and then snarkily just went, "Oh, hi there," when he finally saw him, and Al Gore looks like the biggest idiot. I've just always loved the idea that that's what changed the election, just like a little human moment. It mirrors the Nixon-Kennedy 1960 debate.
Facetious.
Yeah, where that was a remark, and the whole, the obvious cliche with that, how people remember that historical event in the popular
radio versus television?
Use the radio versus television thing, where they say, oh, Nixon won on the radio and Kennedy won it on the television. But honestly, maybe that was true at the time, but when you listen to Kennedy's, his policies, they seem so much more contemporary. Like, they have more contemporary sensibilities than what Nixon's talking about. It seems so, 20th century. So I find that when I watched that debate for the first time, I found that really interesting. That, in retrospect, the Kennedy would win on radio if you were just listening to that debate without watching it.
Yeah.
But it's true, Nixon was sweating like a motherfucker. But I can sympathize.
I mean, the thing I wanted to mention about Al Gore, actually, is that his daughter, Kirsten Gore, at some point she's in the Futurama writing staff.
Really?
Yeah, she's credited with writing Leela's Homeworld, at least.
Oh, wow.
In season 4.
There you go.
And, so Al Gore did have some connection to that's how he was able to get on the show.
Does that episode have an Al Gore reference? That'd be weird.
Oh, I don't think so.
Yeah. That's a pretty good episode. We'll get to that one, though.
Yeah.
One of the first episodes of Futurama I ever saw, actually. Nice.
But yeah, I don't think we discussed so much the episode I Hate in the Polls, which I just want to say...
Yeah, no, we'll get into the episode itself now, but you need context for this, You need to know about Nixon. It's like some boring high school text, they're like, oh, you learn about communism. Then you can read George Orwell.
Okay. Yeah.
So now we've got the context out of the way. Get the episode going.
I really like Ahead in the Polls. I think this is the stronger episode of the season thus far.
Maybe the best, but yeah.
Of the entire season.
Gotta be. Keep going.
Oh, wow. Okay, interesting. Popples is in this season.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Ooh, I might retract that later. Yeah. We'll find out.
So as Anthology of Interest 1, but I'm not going to keep naming episodes. But Ahead in the Polls is I think it's really, really good because it's got this... The Futurama's take on the contemporary American election, even before Nixon gets involved, it just goes. It shows Futurama's take on the
Jack
two
Johnson
parties
and John
being
Jackson.
the exact same.
Yeah.
Oh, and Leela taking it very to Leela. It's like, oh, this is very intense. Like it just goes to show how inundated the future is.
And then she forgets at the end
to vote. Yeah.
And the vote
even without Nixon, it's a fantastic take on the American political system.
Definitely, yeah. I've always loved the voter apathy party, which Fry can relate to.
Oh, how about the professor wanting the NRA?
Oh, yeah.
I got my big rocket launcher for duck hunting. we want to get the mad scientist waiting period over. Jesus.
And Zoidberg votes third party, but only mutants do that.
Yeah, but that's a good thing for him.
Yeah, no, there's some great political satire here. It's just sort of... It hasn't dated. It's still true. It was true then. It's true now.
One interesting anecdote I remember, I don't know if it was when I first saw the episode or if it was on a rerun, but I was watching the episode and my dad happened to be in the room. My dad really liked Futurama. I don't think he was into The Simpsons when it first aired. Like, when I started watching it, he appreciated it more. But he loved Star Trek. Always watched Star Trek on television, Next Gen, original series, whatever.
Do you like the Red Dwarf?
I don't think he ever saw much of Red Dwarf.
Okay.
I don't think he liked that sort of comedy that much. I'm not sure. We never talked about it. I don't think.
Okay.
Maybe. But, but yeah, he liked Futurama. And I just remember, him kind of, chuckling a bit, that the smarmy joke that is... When Fry goes, the election, Friedman goes, it's going to decide who's the president of the world. And Fry goes, it's the United States, it's the United States. I mean, what do I care? The United States is part of the world. And Fry goes, wow, I have been gone a long time. And I guess, in the 2000s, and that's a joke that, my dad laughing at the fact that an American doesn't think that they're part of the world.
Oh, that's a classic joke. Yeah. Now, the whole 80s generation in Australia, I swear, they were raised with that, They're not the biggest fans of Yanks. To them, Yanks were obnoxious and had the American exceptionalism thing just overdone,
Yeah, they thought America was the world, whereas other countries saw themselves as a country in the world.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I mean, the world was kind of inundated with American media, or at least,
Oh, definitely. Still is, of course. We're talking about an American show with an American president. But yeah, definitely. It's fascinating how some shows can make it obnoxious. Let's say the first one that comes to my mind is The King of Queens. Similar to, like, let's say, Seinfeld, set in New York City. It's called The King of Queens because it's named after the Queens borough of New York. I didn't even realize that till recently. It was on television. I'm like, what the fuck? And so it's a show that's just, like, obnoxiously American, right?
Is that the Kevin James show?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So it's just inundating you with Americanisms and things like that, you know? Whereas Futurama is a bit more subtle about it, you know? It's actually more educational when it comes to things like Richard Nixon. It's more like America's PBS, you know?
Yeah.
It's actually educational in a really intuitive and fun sense. And it's led to me knowing about Richard Nixon, for example.
Yeah.
And not for some sort of, like, you know, contrived reason. Like, let's say, a show like King of Queens will maybe make somebody from Australia go for the New York Jets, the football team, because it's in that show. I've met people that, you know, have that sort of logical train of thought.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just like, that's what I mean by when American culture can, like, sort of, it'll seep its way into other countries in an unintuitive sense. Whereas, like, a more educational thing, like PBS, for example, can give you the history of America that's less, like, it's less biased. It's not from with that exceptionalist point of view. It'll be more like sterile and, you know, objective as any sort of cultural.
It was obviously Ken Burns' brilliant journalistic take.
Yeah, that's an example. Ken Burns. That's a PBS thing, right? Yeah.
On the Civil War.
And yeah, it's interesting that Futurama, a Fox show, can do that. That's the one key thing about The Simpsons and Futurama, is that they were shows on Fox, which is, like, about as corporate and sort of, like, biased and awful that broadcasting can get. You know, Rupert Murdoch.
You know what's interesting is that Rupert Murdoch, there's a video out there where Rupert Murdoch himself personally claims that, like, oh, this show will be a smash hit if I put it on this time, like, do that.
Really?
Yeah, like, it's one of those things, like, of course he would claim that in hindsight, but, like, I don't know, like, because we're talking about, like, them, but, like, him seeing them on the Tracy Ullman show, which I think was also on Fox.
Oh, you're talking about The Simpsons?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Futurama.
No.
Okay, so he claims that he was responsible for The Simpsons' success.
Well, like, that, for choosing to, like he personally was, like, saw, like, yeah, let's put that in that time slot in the prime time against The Cosby Show.
Wow.
I don't know if that's true. Of course, one would claim that in hindsight,
supposedly
given how successful it was.
The Ullman shorts were popular, though. I've always heard that.
Yeah.
Like, even here in Australia.
You know, people have said that the Ullman's show did air in Australia.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's hard to say for sure.
But yeah, anyway, back to this Futurama episode. So Nixon gets turned into a robot. And I guess Robot Nixon has a new body, so he can run again, right?
Yeah.
But then at the end, like I mentioned before, I always found it really funny that you mentioned Leela was so enthusiastic about voting at the start of the episode.
Yeah.
Like, there's a great line where Leela's like, quick, change the channel. There's a political debate on. And then Bender's like, oh, that's what Fry said when we came in. Like, Leela's so enthusiastic, but then Nixon ends up winning by one vote. And she didn't even bother voting. And it's just all from the robot votes, because he ends up being, like, a mega... I don't know, is that one of those, like, Gundams or something at the end?
No, it's
like,
not a mobile suit, really.
Okay, he's like but he's like a mecha Nixon.
Yeah.
Which, obviously, I don't think he ever appears as a mecha Nixon again.
No, it's...
Just as a head, obviously, but...
Yeah.
I love Mecha Nixon, it's great.
It's genius. I hope there's an action figure of that out there.
Oh, there should be. Mecha Nixon. Gotta get me one of them.
Yeah, it's funny, like, I think... Yeah, it happens to be... Head in the polls. A really funny episode, like, kind of sharp storyline, just a decent political satire, and you know, just, yeah, fun slice of Futurama, you know, what's like in the 31st century, and, you know, we get a bit of slice of that, we get the characters we know and love doing their thing. Bender's hilarious in the episode. What's the loan shark gonna do, break my legs? It's like, yeah, good logic, I guess.
Oh, Bender as a head is classic, yeah. And some neat 3D animation, things like that.
Yeah, that's good,
the animation budget noticeably kicks up in this season.
Yeah, you get like 3DFX and things like A Clone of My Own, and Hermes Requisition to Groove-Back has like that Brazil-esque sequence, which is quite good.
Yeah.
And then there's that Matrix-esque sequence in Clone of My Own, which I was thinking of. There's a ship effects in Clone of My Own, but there's also that Matrix.
Yeah, that's great. Both those episodes are fairly weak, but have great moments.
That's interesting, yeah. Huh. And you know, the other thing I want to mention, ahead in the poll, Futurama. Yeah, Futurama never felt too American. It was set in the future, so it's in series Star Trek could never feel.
Yeah, it's more worldly. Yeah.
Science fiction shows have a habit of not feeling too American for me. Even you could argue Star Trek 1960s. Like if you're like a British person, you probably think Star Trek 1960s. Star Trek in general was like ridiculously American.
I've always got the feeling science fiction authors loathe American exceptionalism because they see that it's
not Heinlein
bullshit. Yeah, maybe not Heinlein. He just believes in his own exceptionalism.
And also, so I'd get the sense that, like, but for me, I never felt like science fiction was overly, I never saw science fiction and thought that's too American. Television thought that was too American for me. There are American animated, like, comedic shows, meant for adults that sometimes felt too American for me. Whether it was the sense of humor or the thematic content. Futurama being science fiction didn't necessarily have this problem. Even shows that I don't like quite as much, like Rick and Morty or even Archer, like they're kind of science fiction shows. My issue with those shows is not that they're too American in their humor or anything. The Simpsons never quite fell into being too American for me, but it does prevent me from adoring it just because it's like such a road attempt at an American satire, like kind of a 90s Mark Twain. Or you mentioned Kurt Vonnegut. That's nice, maybe a bit over flattering for Simpsons, maybe.
Kurt Vonnegut and The Simpsons. Oh, that's a marriage made in heaven.
But the thing that's too American for me nowadays, even though it is objectively really funny and clever, is South Park. It's too just sanctimonious and kind of
South Park's at its best when it's nonsensical.
Yeah, it's American in that it's so didactic and has this opposition to being too intellectual, whilst also thinking it's smarter than the average person, but also smarter than the average like college-educated person because they're out of touch. But like we're not out of touch. And
definitely.
But it's like it's just.
They probably see The Simpsons as a bit like middle class or something. They're all been to Harvard. Whereas we're from Colorado.
I think they did respect The Simpsons, at least to some extent. I don't know how I felt. I mean, the Simpsons did it seems a bit, or he seemed maybe slightly passive aggressive to me. I'm not sure. Remember Butters as Professor Chaos, and then The Simpsons did it. They may have been having a go at fans who were accusing them of this.
Yeah, that's what they say.
Okay.
Man, I hope one day Matt and Trey get pissed off with us. That'd be great. I'd love to have a feud with Matt and Trey. Let's get it going.
If Matt and Trey started a feud with us, I'd lose so much respect for these 50-year-old guys with kids trying to have a feud with us. Us 20-somethings.
Yeah, that's the thing. They wouldn't. That's more like
if they did, I'd just be like, you guys are pathetic. I'm not even gonna bite this. I'm done. Actually, I probably would. I don't know.
Nah, let's start the feud. Let's start the contrarian opinions. The Book of Mormon. I haven't seen it, but I'm sure it's not that funny. The episode was pretty good, but how many jokes can you fit into a musical about Mormons? It's legitimately funny without needing an audience prompt to laugh at everything. A character winks at the audience. Oh, laugh now, everybody!
I can't sit through musicals and stuff. I have a hard time with film musicals. You may have noticed I haven't discussed many musicals on this channel. There's a couple of Indian musicals. I mean, every other Bollywood film has 3 or 4 musical numbers anyway, so that's besides the point. So I guess any Bollywood film by default almost. but nevertheless, I didn't just watch many musicals.
Yeah.
And the Bollywood musicals, when you're watching these pretty Indian music and the beautiful female vocals and these lovely and it's subtitled, it's not as corny to me. You know what I mean? It's just this lovely display when I'm watching one of those.
Homie's Requisition is Groove, which is in this season, has a song which is a little calypso number, which is okay, but when things like that are inserted into episodes, it feels a bit sort of filler, you know what I mean? And that's the tradition of musical numbers in The Simpsons and Futurama. For the most part, obviously season 1 song is great, In Hell's Other Robots, but musical elements in sitcoms, especially animated sitcoms, I've always feel just a or a cop out.
Yeah, here's how I feel here's why I think they're in there partly. It's because the writers may have a fondness, slight guilty pleasure for like other like forms of like, you know, genre that they're not necessarily working in, and they're like, oh, we always wanted to do like let's do a fun like animated like musical number, let's write and animate it. It's a fun little calypso song. Let's find a way to insert one into Futurama. And like to the fans, it's like, what the fuck are you doing? This isn't why we like the show. Yeah. But to the creators, they're just doing something fun with their creation.
Yeah.
And to the fans, it can be a bit annoying. You have the Simpsons writers, let's include a fun song musical number here, and the fans might find it annoying, but South Park will do it. And the creators, it's just like, oh, it's a bit of fun, but to the fans, it's like, what the heck is this? There are ways of doing it tastefully. I'll give you an example of how to do it in like the tonally different film. Spielberg always wanted to do a musical number. Now, Spielberg, in the 80s, no one was exactly, you know, going to give Spielberg a lot of money to do a musical in the 1980s, but he found a way to insert an Anything Goes number in Chinese. I don't know which kind of Chinese, Mandarin, Han, Hakka, I don't know, it's probably not Hakka.
Cantonese.
Yeah, I think it is Cantonese, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, actually. Hong Kong.
Yeah, totally, that's what it is. The Anything Goes number at the start of Temple of Doom. And he found a way to perfectly insert that into that film, so you can make it work. But
that's in Shanghai, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it is in Shanghai, and for some reason, I was thinking of Shanghai when you said Hong Kong.
Yeah. Okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
Shanghai Opera. Well, not Shanghai Opera. It's not an opera.
But anyway, I feel we've gotten a bit off track here going into musical numbers with Nixon involved. Though there is a great record of Nixon out there, the Checkers speech. I am not a crook. Which, doesn't he say, I'm not a crook's head?
Yeah.
I think they milk every Nixon reference possible.
They'll eat me alive out.
He even, like, woofs like a... He howls like a werewolf. Honestly, the scene in this episode, which is inside the Watergate, you know, the hotel when they break in. Yeah. That's like peak Futurama. That's amazing stuff. Mm-hmm. It's like the best thing in the whole show, honestly. Wow. Like, even Fry with that silly joke with the tentacle bed. Great stuff. Like, that show just... Every scene will have, like... Especially great scenes, will have, like, 5 jokes going on. It's amazing. Not many shows can do that.
One interesting thing about the Nixon pathos I just want to bring about, because the whole they'll eat me alive out there thing, the media machine was really building up in like the post-war mid-20th century America. Presidents usually had like a press conference where like it wasn't televised. It might have been broadcast in like close to the Second World War, but usually it was, you know, reporters writing stuff down, and it was there's a certain decorum about it. And whereas in the more free press era of the 60s on, where you have and you know during the Vietnam War, you have like presidents like LBJ getting hounded by the media. Yeah. Now the media weren't so harsh as to, and who knows if they would have with Nixon, report that LBJ was giving press conferences on the toilet, which is apparently this happened.
Yeah, why not?
But nevertheless, like the media could be, in Cronkite and them, could be very harsh on LBJ, for better or for worse. That's not really relevant. But for better, frankly. But Nixon kind of got the same treatment, and this is relatively... All presidents would get this treatment afterward. All presidents would get eaten alive by the media afterward, because that was just the way of the world now. But Nixon wasn't. Yeah. Nixon wasn't used to that. He had this persecution complex that it was about him. Maybe that it was LBJ's fault because he inherited it, or Kennedy started the war, whomever. But yeah, never. So I just find it interesting that like the presidency was not at all what Nixon thought it would be. I guess he wanted to become the most powerful man ever so that he could all prove it to them. But then he realized he wasn't in charge and he hated it. Yeah. And like a certain other recent president, when he realized he wasn't he was the most powerful man in the world, but he couldn't stop the media from making jabs at him, and so he devoted his presidency to taking shots at the media via his internet social media profile. That's the world, you know.
Well, yeah, Nixon was at a weird standstill. Oliver Stone tries to capture it in his movie about Nixon.
I never saw that before.
There's one scene in it which it feels a bit like a movie, but it's based off a real incident where there were all these protesters, you know, Vietnam protesters outside the White House for years. And he goes outside and talks with all these like 16 and 17-year-old kids. And they end up accusing him. They think he's a part of the big machine or whatever. But he mentions that this machine, which is made up of, bureaucrats and sort of lobbyists and all like funding the media and the state to sort of to get what they want. And Nixon was very opposed to that. He thought they were the enemy, and all the young hippies and whatnot, all the Vietnam protesters saw Nixon as that, and he's trying to like rap with them and like tell them that but to them he just represented that whole thing, right? And so I think that was so much of Nixon's paranoia. He thought he was going to like change the system or whatever. Like similar to even a Trump thing or the weird like, aura around Donald Trump's like the Q stuff, right? Yeah, there's a weird thing there where people thought he was going to like change the machine, and I think Nixon had that delusion that he himself thought he was going to change the machine.
Yeah.
But in the end, everyone saw him as just the establishment, which is exactly what he didn't see in himself. And so Nixon's like an example of like an identity crisis or something.
Yeah. Nixon did want to, in all this talk about the silent majority, Nixon absolutely wanted to destroy the counterculture and destroy kind of certain affects of maybe things like the sexual revolution or the civil rights movement that the common American person of old world values, let's say, I'm not trying to put anyone down, but old world values. And he was trying to make those people feel more comfortable. Why can't things be like they used to be? And Nixon was trying to do that.
That's how he got elected.
And funnily enough, that would also entail an end to the Vietnam War. So on that end, he was possibly... Nixon and Kissinger, for what it was worth, very bloody and like callous minds, they were trying to end that war by killing a hell of a lot more people. But they were trying to end the war as ruthlessly and sadistically as they were, and bureaucratically and devilishly as they went about it. Horrifying as it was, real evil, and so Nixon wanted to take things back to normal, and that entailed the positive, I would say, and a lot of other people say now, positive developments of the 1960s. He wanted to reverse some of this, and he also wanted to reverse the Vietnam War, and blundered it.
Yeah, that's the overall failure of Nixon is like incompetence, which is just like fodder for Futurama, right? And that's why there's a genuine like, I was gonna say 8-year presidency, but I think it ended up being about 7 years of Nixon's life where he left a whole trail of pre-internet memes essentially, which Futurama like harvested like comedy farmers and then like laid into to create a meme generation, let's say, to sort of Futurama brought a bit of the analog world into the digital world of humor, right? And then the sort of bridge between the two is Futurama. I never really thought about it till now, but Nixon's got something to do with it.
I'd recommend everyone track down and watch the great Adam Curtis short documentary titled "We Are All Richard Nixon."
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if it's titled that, but that's the theme of the piece.
Yeah, it's about 5 minutes. Watch it.
Yeah, terrific stuff. Very fun episode here. Is there anything else you'd like to share? Because I think I'm out.
Oh, no, I'm out too. Nixon is like one of the greatest characters in Futurama, which, like everything in Futurama that's great, it shouldn't be, but it is.
Absolutely. Well, thanks everyone for listening to this. Have a great one.
Yeah.
We'll see you next time, if you're so inclined.